Hey, Jim Schultz here for the F-Cubed podcast, and if you guys are just listening to the audio-only version of this podcast, then this probably doesn't sound or seem too different, but we now have a video version of the podcast, and so I'm really just chilling, man. Like, I didn't go, this isn't like a full-scale setup like I do for my normal YouTube videos. Not that that's like some great production, but in the same area of my house, I've kind of got the studio set up a little bit differently, and I definitely look a little bit like, a prisoner in Afghanistan, a little bit. We got the Jesus sign, so that's obviously a positive thing, but yeah, I kind of thought, some of you might listen to this on iTunes or Spotify or whatever, and some of you might prefer the video version. So if you want to see me kind of, walking through all the same stuff and just kind of riffing about these topics, then I thought, hey, let's do the video version. And I obviously haven't done an amazing job with the setup because you can see all the jankiness of my cords. You can see that the way I have this set up, my left arm is like just straight up pinned down below the mic. So anyway, hopefully it will improve over time, but F-Cubed podcast, man, we're back, and I am super, super pumped about this episode because what I want to do tonight is I want to take a minute and I want to defend fixed meal plans. Now, that might sound like really crazy coming from me. Like, that might sound like totally out of left field coming from me because I'm the biggest flexible guy you guys will ever meet, right? Like, I am all in on flexible diets. Like, I firmly believe, and the evidence supports, and yada, 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 that flexible diets are the way to sustainability, right? But I'll tell you guys something, man. There's just something about a really solid fixed diet. And I want to talk about that here tonight because I'm in training for, the bodybuilding states later on in November. Some of you might have been, or you might be, or you might have known that I am in training, and I've been in training since the beginning of the year, and I'm set to take the stage on November 23rd. And so if you've been following, kind of like my process throughout, whether it be on the podcast or the YouTube videos or Instagram, Twitter, whatever, right? You guys been following my journey, and I'm like 35 weeks in now. And let me tell you guys something, man. I have pretty much settled into a fixed diet. Like, I have pretty much settled into, I eat pretty much the exact same things every day. There is not a whole lot of variation from one day to the next. Now, that's maybe 5 days out of the week, right? I would say that the other couple of days, like I have dinner with my wife and, we go out to eat and that kind of stuff. And so there's definitely some flexibility in there. But my diet right now is very, very fixed. And so I wanted to talk about that and talk about some of the really, really positive things associated with that. Because I think, like, for you guys out there that are trying to figure out, and I found a way to free my left hand, so that's good. For those of you guys out there that are trying to figure out, like, hey, should I do a fixed diet? Should I do a flexible diet? I've talked about this before on the podcast. I haven't really talked about this a ton on the YouTube channel, so this will be new if you're kind of checking it out over there on YouTube. But there are pros and cons to both, right? So the first thing I want to say is there's no perfect diet, right? There's no perfect solution out there that's going to fix all your problems. That's just going to be this panacea across the board where you're never hungry, you're never bored, like everything is perfect, everything is just marshmallows and macaroons, and you're set and you're ready to go. Like, that doesn't exist. Like, that absolutely does not exist. And so let's be really clear. We definitely need that, or I'll be popping some peas, man. So we got to be really clear that that does not exist. Well, that being said, I talk a ton about flexible dieting. I talk a ton about the benefits of flexible dieting. I talk a ton. You guys are seeing all the behind the scenes stuff now. Like, all this stuff is normally happening, by the way, on the podcast, but now you guys are just able to see it. And so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's the thing that we're dealing with. Flexible dieting is required for long-term sustainability. So let me say that on the front end. If you really want to be sustainable with your diet in the long term, if you really want to achieve some level of leanness that maybe you've never achieved before, or maybe you have achieved it before, but you weren't able to hold it, you weren't able to keep it, right? I think we've all kind of been there. I know I've been there more times than I care to admit. But maybe you want to say, all right, this time I really want to hang on to most of it, right? It's a lot of times it's unrealistic to expect to hang on to all of it because nobody walks around at their lightest, leanest weight ever. But can you hold on to 75, 80% of it? Like, yeah, that's probably realistic. To be able to do that, flexible dieting needs to be at the center of what you do. Now, how flexible you want to be, you don't have to eat different things every single day. You don't have to eat like a brand new menu every single day just to wear it as a badge of honor and say it to all your friends on Instagram that you've never actually met in real life. Hey, I can eat whatever I want every day. I just added my macros and I'm able to achieve, this look or this physique or whatever the case may be. But that's absolutely true. From a flexible dieting standpoint, those things need to be in place. I don't want to talk about that tonight. We've already spent a couple minutes on that. I want to focus on the really positive things that come with a fixed diet. The really positive things that come with eating the same thing every single day. I think that fixed diets, kind of your classic bro, not split, that's like training wise, but your classic bro diet, your old school bodybuilding diet, chicken and broccoli, tilapia and asparagus, a protein shake and peanut butter, whatever. I mean, you could slice it up a number of different ways, but they all pretty much end up with, beef and sweet potato, chicken and rice. I mean, it's all the same crap, right? I mean, that's just how it is. That usually gets a bad rap, especially in the serious fitness circles right now. And I've given it a bad rap in the past, so I've been a contributor to said bad rap. But I wanted to take a minute tonight, or probably more like 17 minutes, and I wanted to lay out some of the positive things around a fixed diet because I'm doing one right now, and I'm doing it on purpose. I'm doing it intentionally. Like, I could choose a flexible diet, but I'm choosing more of a fixed diet. I'm choosing more of a fixed diet right now, and I want to talk about that a little bit tonight. That might help you decide, what kind of a dieting strategy will be best for what you're trying to do. All right, so the first thing that I want to make sure that we're all aware of is there's a cost to tracking macros. Now, again, I'm the biggest proponent of macro tracking you will ever find. I believe it is the best way to diet. I believe it is the best way to achieve sustainability with your physique. I believe all those things 100% with my whole being. But I'm still aware that there is a cost to tracking macros. And that cost manifests itself in a couple of different ways, right? There's a time cost, obviously. There's an investment to have to weigh your food and track your food and constantly be mindful and attentive to your numbers for the day, for the week, for the period, whatever the case may be. That's not free, man. Like, that costs something. It costs time, it costs energy, it costs resources, both mental resources, physical resources, emotional resources. Like, there's a lot of resource allocation going into your macro tracking. That's just the truth. Well, here's what's really cool about a fixed diet. There's a lot less of that. There's a lot less of that because once you settle into a rhythm, every day pretty much looks the same. You just change a little bit here and there to hit your macro targets for the week. I'm still tracking macros. You're still tracking macros. But man, let me tell you something. It is so easy. Like, literally, and I'm not making this up. I'm going to time it one day, and I'm going to have Autumn video me timing my meal prep, not my meal prep, but my macro tracking and calculating things and doing all that stuff. It might be 2 minutes, maybe, across the entire day. It might be 90 seconds, right? It's not a lot of time. Like, it's all so streamlined. Like, I have the same foods in roughly the same quantities. I can just carry it over from the previous day and just make minor tweaks. Like, oh, instead of having 12 ounces of chicken at lunch, I had 11 or 11 and a half. Like, yeah, I'm making those adjustments because they matter, but literally, I mean, that's 3 seconds. It's like a second and a half in my phone. Like, it just doesn't take that much time. And so that frees me up to do other things. Do other things at work, do other things at home, do other things with F Cubed, like video my podcast, for example, right? There's a lot of different things that I can do. And so one of the really big benefits of a fixed diet, in my opinion, is it really frees you up, man. It really frees you up. It allows you to still track macros, to still be mindful of your numbers. So if is what I was searching for. if things aren't going the way you want them to go, then you can make the adjustments. Like, you know what's going on. You're not just in the dark without a flashlight. Like, you know, I mean, the light's on. All 6 of them are on in this room. Like, you know exactly what's going on. So you don't have to feel like you're following a fixed diet, but you won't know how to adjust, right? That's one of the big downsides to fixed diets usually is they're great and they usually start off strong, but then once you hit a plateau, once you hit a sticking point, like, how do you change? How do you adjust? Do you just eat a little bit less apple, a little bit less sweet potato, like a little bit less oatmeal? Like, yeah, obviously that's what you're going to do, but sometimes that's hard to quantify because you're not quantifying it, right? So in some ways it's impossible to quantify. But if you're not doing it, it can be difficult to know if you're adjusting enough, if you're adjusting too much, like all that kind of stuff. There's a time and a place for that too. You get into kind of the intuitive side of things and whatnot, but that's a separate discussion altogether as well. The main thing that I really wanted to point out here tonight is it just makes things way easier. It just makes things way easier. So for you out there, you know, it kind of depends on where you're at in the process, right? Like, if you're just starting out, like if this is brand new to you, then I think a fixed diet is probably the way to go for you right now because you've got a lot of learning to do. You've got a little bit of investment that you're going to have to make. Like, if you're just starting out, then you're going to have to learn how to weigh your food. You're going to have to learn how to measure your food. You're going to have to learn how to enter all these things into like MyFitnessPal or whatever. That's going to take some time, right? So I wouldn't pair all that up with also figuring out how to cook, you know, low-fat lasagna and figure that out and fit that into your numbers. That just doesn't even make any sense, right? You're just making this way harder than it needs to be. Like, save that for a future project. Right now, just figure out 4, 5, 6 meals a day, have roughly the same meals every day, or maybe exactly the same meals every day, and give yourself some time to get used to, you know, calculating macros and going through the process. The other time when I think of fixed diet, we're going to try to fix this setup. Speaking of fixed, we're going to try to fix this setup for the next video podcast, but who knows, man. The other time when a fixed meal plan might make a lot of sense is if you're in a similar situation to what I'm in right now. Now, you may not be training for a competition. You may not be training for a bodybuilding show per se, but maybe you are in a fat loss phase, right? And maybe you are, you know, you're kind of a ways into the process. And so you're thinking, man, like, I could really use a 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 week block where I don't really have to think about this so much. My training is wearing me down. The fatigue is accumulating. And I could really use an opportunity to take some of the load off, right? Like, I could really use something to make this a little bit easier, you know, to make the inevitable crappiness of a diet a little bit less crappy, let's say, right? There's obviously some level of crap that you just have to accept. You have to embrace it, right? Like, you just can't get away from it. But there are certain things that you can do to maybe lessen the blow, you know, just a little bit. So those are a couple of times when I think a fixed diet probably would make a lot of sense for you. You know, so the other thing when it comes to fixed diets that I think a lot of people forget about, that I think a lot of people don't really take into account, and myself included, I'm actually guilty of this a lot of the time, is that the beauty of macros is you know everything. So the beauty of tracking macros, whether it's fixed or flexible, it doesn't matter. But the beauty of macros is there are so few variables from a nutritional standpoint that you don't know because you're quantifying everything. You're measuring your protein, your carbs, your fats, your fiber, right? So when it comes time to make adjustments, like, it's easy to make adjustments. When things aren't happening the way you would like them to happen, it's usually pretty clear as to why, you know, things aren't progressing the way you would like them to progress. But sometimes, especially when you have a really highly flexible diet, which is perfectly fine, of course, but sometimes weird things start to happen. Sometimes weird things start to happen with your weigh-ins. Sometimes weird things start to happen with your progress, and you can't really put your finger on what's going wrong. Now, my experience has shown me, and this applies to even myself, not only, you know, my students inside of Full Throttle, you know, the clients I've coached in the past, like just the people I've talked with, most of the time, like 75 to 85% of the time, the problem is you are miscalculating and misrepresenting your macros. Like, you think you're eating X and you're not. You're actually eating X plus Y. And sometimes Y is a lot larger than you might think it is. And so because of the flexibility of your diet, you're not accurately tracking your macros. So that's three-quarters of the time, that's going to account for any issues that you're seeing or finding with your lack of progress. But some of the time, 20-25%, it's actually something else. Some of the time, everything is in line. All your macros are in place. They're on point. They're accurate. That's not the issue. The reliability of those data is secure. You don't have to worry about that. But then there's other things that are being brought into the mix, like Splenda, like Walden Farms, like these 0-calorie foods that actually have sometimes like half a carb, 3/4 of a carb in them. And it's like, all right, I've got a lot of calories that are adding up here that I'm not quite aware of. Now, that could be the case whether it's flexible or fixed. But generally speaking, when the flexibility goes up, those types of foods tend to go higher too. Those mystery ingredients, those things that might be happening in your diet that maybe you aren't quantifying, like you're quantifying other things like diet soda, not from a calorie standpoint, but from a caffeination standpoint, and like a holding water standpoint or a bloating standpoint, right? Like these things that can cause your weigh-ins to do some really, really janky things from one day to the next. Well, the point of my kind of rambling for the last 45 seconds, I was definitely yammering there for a minute, is when you have a fixed diet, you're eliminating so many of those variables. Like, yes, you're still drinking diet soda. I have 2 Diet Pepsis every single day. And come at me with the aspartame and the sucralose stuff, because there ain't nothing there. But nevertheless, I have 2 Diet Pepsis every single, whether it's there or not, I don't even care. I have 2 Diet Pepsis every single day. I have Splenda in my oatmeal every single day. I have Splenda in my coffee every single day. But these things are very, very consistent from one day to the next. These things are very, very reliable from one day to the next. And so because my diet is so fixed, I know that those outside variables that might change quite a bit if things were really flexible. And I'm not even talking about not accurately calculating the macros of the dish. I'm talking about the other things that kind of come around that, with like, the water intake of the meal, the addition of artificial type stuff that can have bloating issues, or, these extra carbs that start to add up a little bit, the diet soda, just all these kind of things that you don't usually quantify like you might something else. Those are going to be much, much lower. Those are going to be much, much less when it comes to a fixed diet than what you might find with a flexible diet. And so that's a really positive thing, man. That's a really positive thing, because let me tell you guys something, and we're doing pretty good on time. We're at about 20 minutes. We'll probably wrap it up with this. The psychological aspect of dieting, it cannot be overstated. I'm going to start talking about this a whole lot more in upcoming podcasts and YouTube's podcasts and Facebooks and Instagrams and Snapchats. I'm not even on Snapchat, but maybe we'll be on there pretty soon. I don't know. But in all the things that I'm going to be talking about, this is really, really important, because I'm in the midst right now. Like I'm in the forest right now, right? So I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the effects, and there's just something, really cool about actually, being in the middle of what you're trying to share with your audience, and being in the middle of what you're trying to communicate to other people. Like, I'm going through it right now. I'm experiencing it right now, and let me tell you, it's at least 2 parts. It's at least 1 part mental for every 2 parts physical. It's at least 1 part psychological for every 2 parts physiological. I've said that before. That is absolutely true. It may even be more than that, honestly. It may be 2 to 1 the other way. I'm not sure. That's kind of why I hesitated, because I'm like, we could put this the other way too, and it would absolutely apply. From one day to the next, if you're expecting to see progress and you don't see progress, that messes with you, man. From one day to the next, if you have hit a low day just out of the park, and every macro was on point, every gram was calculated, every single ounce was weighed, and you step on the scale the following morning and you don't like what you see, man, that's real. That's real stuff. That messes with you when you're really trying with everything you have to push that scale lower, to strip that body fat off of your frame. Like, I totally get it. I totally understand. And so what we need to do is we need to be aware of this, right? We need to just come to an understanding that this is the truth. And so one of the ways that you can limit and minimize the number of odd readings on the scale that you see with your weigh-ins. You can never totally eliminate them because one day to the next things can be quite random. But when you have a fixed diet, because your nutrition plays such a huge role in your overall fat loss and your overall weight loss, but also your day-to-day fluctuations, how much water you've taken in, how much sodium you've taken in. I didn't even talk about sodium, but when you start talking about flexible dieting, the sodium content of one meal to the next, man, it could be astronomically different. And if you have a day where you take in 3,000 milligrams of sodium and your normal day is 5,000 milligrams, like that's going to be a huge difference on the weigh-in the following day. It might go up, it might go down. It could go, everybody's body kind of processes that differently. Usually when you cut sodium like that, your body weight tends to go higher. And so that's not a really positive thing when you're trying to push that thing down. But that's just another example of what I'm talking about. And so the psychological aspect is very important. So I want to leave you guys with this. If you're kind of trying to figure out, hey, what should I be doing with my nutrition? Just to kind of summarize, you've got to be flexible to some degree, to a large degree. But if you want to have a period where it's mostly fixed, it doesn't have to be 100% fixed, right? Like I shared, kind of in the intro. Like I have dinner with Autumn. We usually go out on a date, not maybe every single week, but 2-3 times a month, I would say, where we go out and we have, we eat at a restaurant and I make good choices and I'm estimating the foods to the best of my ability. And I've been able to pretty much do that the whole way through to this point. That's probably going to change in the next month or so, but I've been able to do that up until now and it's been great, right? And so there's ways to kind of make this work for you. You don't have to think black or white. You don't have to think on or off. This is not all or nothing, right? We're not playing Texas Hold'em. Like you can chip away at the pot. You can kind of play some small ball and just kind of adjust as you go and just try different things out. So I hope that was helpful for you guys, man. I hope you guys enjoyed the new video format. For those of you that checked this out on YouTube, if you made it all the way to this point, man, you deserve an award of some kind. But if you did make it all the way to this point and you're on YouTube, let me know, right? I mean, it's not fancy. It's just straight up, how I normally do these podcasts. I mean, I'm just here at my desk. I've got my mic and I just roll with it. So, not super high production, but again, you guys might prefer to watch the video version on YouTube or even just listen to the video on YouTube while you're at the gym or you're walking the dog or whatever the case may be. So that's it, man. That's fixed and flexible meal plans. I hope it gave you guys a little bit of value to think about how you want to attack your own nutrition. If you guys want to share this podcast with a friend, whether you share the audio version on, Spotify or iTunes or whatever, or you share out the video on YouTube, that'd be amazing. If you want to subscribe on whatever podcast player you're listening to this on or subscribe to the YouTube channel, that would be doubly amazing. And then, yeah, man, I think that's it. I think we'll just see you guys next time.